The prestigious halls of St. Andrew's Academy usually echoed with the soft shuffle of polished shoes, the rustle of crisp uniforms, and the hum of well-paid tutors guiding children of the elite. It was a sanctuary for wealth, a place where futures were secured by privilege long before exams were even written. That morning, however, something unusual stirred in one of the bright classrooms. Janet Lawrence, one of the wealthiest women in the city, and a high-profile attorney, had come unannounced to surprise her daughter Mirabelle. She had intended only to peek through the glass, perhaps watch the little girl recite a poem or solve an equation. But as she approached the door, voices reached her voices that stopped her in her tracks. One was her daughter's, eager and light. "Can you explain that part again? I don't understand." The other was not a teacher's voice. It was lower, steady, but filled with warmth, sure. "Look, if you break the numbers apart, it's easier. 10 plus 5 makes 15, and then you just add the rest. Try it this way." Janet frowned, pressing closer to the glass pane. Inside, her daughter sat at a desk, her notebook open. Beside her, hunched over the same page, was a boy. Thin, pale, his clothes worn and patched hair, messy as though it hadn't known a comb in days. His shoes were torn, his backpack threadbare. He did not belong in these pristine halls. Yet Mirabelle's face glowed with excitement as she scribbled the answer, then looked up at the boy with admiration. "I got it. You're so smart, Ben." The boy smiled shyly, scratching the back of his neck. "It's just practice. Once you understand the pattern, math isn't scary anymore." Janet's breath caught. A homeless boy, by the look of him, was sitting in her daughter's elite classroom, teaching her as though he belonged there. For a moment, indignation flared. Who let this child inside? Where are the teachers? But then something unexpected tugged at her. She looked closer. The boy's eyes, though shadowed with exhaustion, shone with sharp intelligence. He explained patiently, his finger tracing the problem as he encouraged Mirabelle to try again. Not once did he speak down to her. Not once did he mock her mistake. He taught with the kind of patience Janet had rarely seen, even in professionals. As Janet pushed the door open, the hinges creaked. Both children froze. Mirabelle lit up Mama. "Look, Benjamin is helping me with my homework. He makes it so easy to understand." The boy jumped to his feet, startled. His hands fumbled as he gathered his tattered notebook. I'm sorry, ma'am." He stammered, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just—" His words trailed off as he lowered his gaze, bracing for anger, for punishment, for the cold rejection he had learned to expect from adults in power. But Janet didn't speak right away. She stood there, her heart torn between outrage and astonishment. Outrage that her daughter was being taught by a stranger, and astonishment that the stranger was a boy who clearly had no home. No privilege, yet possessed the discipline and brilliance to guide her child better than any tutor she had hired. Silence thickened, broken only by Mirabelle's small, innocent voice. "Please don't be mad, Mama. Benjamin's my friend, and he's the best teacher I've ever had." Janet's throat tightened. This was not what she expected to see when she walked into St. Andrew's that morning. And what she did next, no one in that school nor in the city's polished social circles would ever forget. Long before he found himself in the classroom of the wealthy, Benjamin had known only sidewalks and shelters as his school. He was 7 years old but looked smaller, his frame thin from skipped meals. His mother, a laundress, had worked tirelessly to keep them afloat, patching clothes by candlelight, whispering bedtime stories from worn-out books. She taught him his letters by tracing words with soap on scraps of cardboard, smiling despite her exhaustion. "If you can read, Ben, you'll never be truly poor," she would say. But illness came swift and merciless. When she passed, Benjamin was left with nothing but a small notebook she had filled with handwritten lessons and a heart full of her words. No relatives claimed him. No guardian stepped forward. He drifted into the streets, clutching that notebook like a lifeline. By day, he scavenged. By night, he pressed himself against the back wall of the public library, waiting for the guard to leave, then slipping inside quietly to read, until dawn chased him out. He devoured anything he could, math, primers, storybooks, even tattered encyclopedias no one touched. Hunger gnawed at him, but his hunger for knowledge was fiercer. Sometimes he lingered outside classroom windows of the city's schools, listening to teachers through the glass. He memorized formulas, repeated vocabulary words under his breath. The children inside never noticed him. To them he was invisible, until Mirabelle. It had been a rainy afternoon. Benjamin had been crouched beneath the academy's side steps, scribbling sums in his mother's notebook with a stub of pencil. The doors burst open, and a girl in a pristine uniform stumbled out, frustrated tears streaking her cheeks. She clutched a math workbook in one hand, muttering angrily. Benjamin looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment he expected her to sneer, to walk away like others always did. Instead, she wiped her nose with the back of her hand and asked bluntly, "Do you know fractions?" He blinked. "Yes, I think so." She shoved the workbook toward him. "Then show me, because I don't get it at all." And so, huddled under the dripping awning, Benjamin explained. Awkward at first, then, with growing confidence, he drew shapes in the wet dirt to show how parts made a whole. Mirabelle's frown eased, her eyes widened, and suddenly she was laughing. "That's easy. Why didn't my teacher say it like that?" From that day on, she sought him out. At first outside, then sneaking him into the back of her classroom during breaks. He never asked why she trusted him, why she shared her lunches, or called him friend. He only knew that for the first time since his mother's death, he felt seen. Still, fears shadowed every step. He knew he didn't belong in marble halls or polished classrooms. One angry adult could send him back to the streets. So whenever he sat with Mirabelle bent over her assignments, he kept one ear tuned for footsteps, one eye on the door. And yet, despite the risk, he stayed. Because when she looked at him with wonder and said, "You make me feel smart," he remembered his mother's words, "If you can read Ben, you'll never be truly poor." Now standing in the presence of Mirabelle's mother, the billionaire attorney whose name commanded respect across the city, Benjamin's secret world threatened to unravel. He braced himself for punishment, ready to be dragged out and banned forever. What he didn't know was that Janet Lawrence had seen more than a ragged boy in her daughter's classroom. She had seen a spark, and that spark would soon ignite a fire that no one could ignore. The stillness in the classroom after Janet's arrival did not last long. Within minutes, a teacher hurried in, her heels clicking against the tile. Her eyes narrowed as soon as she saw Benjamin. "You again?" She hissed, her voice sharp with indignation. "How many times must I tell you this school is not for vagrants? Out before I call security." Benjamin flinched. He clutched his fraying notebook to his chest, his knuckles white. His throat tightened with words he could not force out. He knew resistance was useless. The world had taught him what happened when boys like him argued with adults who had power. But before he could move, a small figure stepped between him and the teacher. It was Mirabelle. Her chin lifted, her eyes blazing with determination that belied her 7 years. "No, he stays. Benjamin is my friend, and he helps me learn better than anyone else." The teacher blinked, startled by the child's defiance. "Mirabelle, darling, you don't understand. This boy doesn't belong here. He's smart." "Mirabelle," interrupted, her voice ringing clear. "Smarter than the tutors you bring, and kind. He listens to me. He believes I can do it. You never do." The room went silent. Benjamin's chest constricted, a strange warmth spreading through him. He had never been defended before, not like this. But the teacher's face hardened. "Enough. Security will escort him out. It's for your own safety." Their uniforms gleamed, their expressions cold. One gestured roughly, "Come on, boy. You don't belong here." Benjamin's feet refused to move. His legs trembled, but he remained rooted, staring down at the floor. He had endured hunger, cold, and loneliness. But something about this moment, being dragged away from the only friend he had found, was unbearable. "Stop," Mirabelle cried, clutching Benjamin's arm. Her eyes filled with tears. "If he goes, I go too." The guards hesitated, exchanging glances. One muttered, "We can't touch the Lawrence girl." At that moment, whispers spread through the corridor. Other students had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Their polished shoes squeaked as they crowded near the doorway, whispering among themselves. "Is that the homeless boy?" They say he sneaks into the library at night. He's filthy. Why would Mirabelle talk to him? Because he's clever, maybe. Look at how she defends him. The gossip stung like stones hurled at Benjamin. His ears burned, his shoulders hunched. But then he felt Mirabelle's hand tighten in his. Her small voice shook but remained firm. He's not filthy. He's brave. He's my friend. And I won't let anyone hurt him. Up until then, she had stood silently watching weighing. Now her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. That's enough. The guards froze mid-step. The teacher paled. Even the students outside hushed. Janet stepped forward, her heels steady, her expression unreadable. She looked from her daughter to the trembling boy, then to the guards who loomed over him. Her gaze hardened. No one touches this child. The words shocked everyone. Even Mirabelle blinked in surprise before breaking into a relieved smile. Benjamin's breath caught. He looked up at the woman whose power filled the room. He had expected scorn, punishment, rejection. Instead, she stood like a shield. The teacher stammered, "B?" "But, Mrs. Lawrence, this boy, he has no place here. He's homeless." Janet's eyes sharpened. "And yet, he's teaching my daughter what her expensive tutors could not." Which raises the question, who truly has no place here? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some students gasped, others exchanged wide-eyed looks. Benjamin's chest tightened, his throat burning. He could not speak, but his silence was loud. Louder than the gossip, louder than the teacher's protests. Mirabelle squeezed his hand triumphantly. "See, Benjamin, Mama believes in you too." For the first time, Benjamin dared to lift his head. His eyes met Janet's. He saw neither pity nor disdain, only a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even respect. But respect in places like this was fragile. Outside those walls, society's judgments would only grow harsher, and neither Benjamin nor Janet could guess yet just how much their lives were about to intertwine, or how much louder the whispers would become once word spread that a billionaire mother had stood up for a homeless boy. The silence that followed Janet's command still clung to the classroom walls. The guards retreated awkwardly, the teacher bowed her head, and the students scattered, whispering in awe. But Benjamin stood frozen, his thin shoulders rigid, his notebook clutched tight against his chest as though it were a shield. Janet's gaze softened. "Benjamin, isn't it?" He nodded slowly, eyes darting to the floor. He half expected her tone to harden, for the reprieve to vanish like a dream. But instead she extended a hand toward him. "Walk with me." Mirabelle beamed, tugging at his sleeve. "Come on, Ben. Mama wants to know you." Janet led them into the quiet of the courtyard, away from curious ears. The spring sunlight filtered through tall trees, casting shifting patterns across the stone benches. She gestured for Benjamin to sit. The boy hesitated before lowering himself onto the edge, his back straight, his small hands folded over his notebook. Janet sat opposite him. Mirabelle nestled at her side. For a long moment she simply studied him. His clothes were worn thin, his shoes frayed, but his posture carried a dignity beyond his years. His eyes, though shadowed with weariness, were sharp, alive, with a hunger that was not for food alone. "Tell me your story," Janet said softly. Benjamin's lips parted, then closed again. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mother, she was all I had. She cleaned clothes for people in town. At night she taught me to read and write. She said if I could read, I'd never be poor." His fingers traced the spine of the notebook. "When she got sick, she couldn't work anymore. We sold everything for medicine. But it wasn't enough. His voice cracked. He blinked hard, swallowing. "She died last winter." Janet's chest tightened. Mirabelle's small hand reached out, covering Benjamin's trembling fingers. "I tried to stay with neighbors," Benjamin continued, "but no one wanted me. So I kept moving. I sleep where I can, and I read in the library when they let me. I listen outside classrooms. Sometimes I copy lessons into this." He lifted the notebook reverently. Its pages were worn, filled with careful handwriting and sketches. "It's all I have left of her. She wrote in it before she died. I promised I'd keep learning." Janet leaned forward, her throat thick. "And yet, despite all that, you helped my daughter with her homework." Benjamin shrugged faintly, his voice steadier now. "It makes me feel less alone. When I explain things, it's like I can hear my mother again. She always said teaching someone else means you truly understand. His eyes flickered up at Janet, wary but proud. I don't want pity. I just want a chance to learn. A chance to become someone she'd be proud of. Janet inhaled deeply, her gaze fixed on the boy before her. In her career, she had defended clients who had lost everything, families shattered by injustice, children failed by the system. But never had she seen the struggle so raw, so close to her own home. Mirabelle leaned against her mother, her voice firm. Mama, you always tell me to stand up for what's right. Benjamin is right. He's good. Can he stay with us? Please, Janet's carefully guarded composure wavered. She looked at her daughter, innocent, earnest, and then at Benjamin, who sat like someone bracing for rejection, yet refusing to beg. Something inside her shifted. This boy was not a threat. He was not a burden. He was proof that brilliance could bloom even in the cracks of hardship. And she, with all her power and wealth, had stumbled upon it by accident. Janet exhaled slowly, her voice quiet but resolute. Benjamin, you've shown me more courage today than most adults I know. You will not be cast aside again. Not while I have a say. Benjamin's head jerked up, his eyes wide. For the first time in years, hope flickered there, tentative, fragile, but real. That afternoon, whispers spread beyond the academy walls. The billionaire mother had defended a homeless boy. Some scoffed, others sneered, but many were struck speechless. And for Benjamin, the tide of his life had begun to turn, though neither he nor Janet yet knew just how far it would carry them. By the end of the week, the story had slipped beyond the walls of St. Andrew's Academy. Billionaire mother defends homeless boy in classroom showdown. Who is the street child sitting beside Mirabelle Lawrence? Janet Lawrence's reputation at risk. Headlines blared across tabloids and society columns. Some praised Janet's compassion. Others sneered, questioning her judgment. On talk shows, commentators debated, should a boy from the streets be allowed near the children of the elite? At the academy, parents murmured in tight circles, their voices dripping with disdain. It's unsafe, one whispered. What if he steals? What if he carries disease? Another shook her head, clutching her pearls. Janet has lost her mind, letting that child near her daughter. As one of the city's most successful attorneys, she had faced hostile courtrooms and relentless reporters. But this was different. This was about her child and about Benjamin, whose thin shoulders carried the weight of every sneer. She saw it each morning. Benjamin lingered near the gates, clutching his notebook, debating whether to enter. Mirabelle always spotted him first, running to his side, grabbing his hand boldly. Come on, Ben, don't listen to them. But Benjamin's eyes betrayed the truth. Every stare cut him, every whisper bruised him deeper than hunger ever had. One afternoon, matters came to a head. The academy convened an emergency board meeting, summoning Janet to the marble hall, lined with portraits of past benefactors. The room buzzed with murmurs as she entered, Mirabelle at her side, Benjamin waiting nervously in the corridor. Mrs. Lawrence, when the headmaster began adjusting his spectacles, we respect your generosity to this institution. But this situation, allowing a vagrant boy to mix with our students, has caused quite a stir. Other parents are threatening to withdraw their children. A mother rose from her chair, her voice sharp. This is a school for the elite. We cannot allow our children to mingle with someone from the gutter. Murmurs of agreement followed. Janet's jaw tightened, but before she could speak, Mirabelle shot to her feet. Her small voice rang out, startling the room into silence. Benjamin is my friend. He's not from the gutter. He's smart and kind, and he helps me. You're just jealous because your tutors can't teach like he does. Gasps rippled. The headmaster frowned. Mirabelle, sit down. This is not, but Janet raised a hand. No. Let her speak. The girl's cheeks flushed, but she stood tall. If Benjamin goes, I go too. The room erupted in protest. Ridiculous, unacceptable. She's a child. Janet rose slowly, her presence commanding the hall. Enough. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. The parents fell silent, the headmaster stiffening. Janet's eyes swept the room, her words deliberate. You call yourselves guardians of education. Yet you would turn away a boy who embodies its very spirit. Benjamin has no wealth, no privilege, no name to open doors. And still, he taught my daughter more in one afternoon than all your tutors combined. He is proof that brilliance is not reserved for the rich. A father muttered, "But he doesn't belong here." Janet's gaze burned into him. Doesn't belong. Knowledge belongs to everyone. Hope belongs to everyone. My daughter sees it. Why can't you? The silence that followed was heavy charged. Some parents looked ashamed. Others still glared, unwilling to yield. Janet leaned forward, her voice resolute. Understand this. I will not allow Benjamin to be humiliated, cast aside, or treated as less than human. If this academy cannot see his worth, then perhaps my daughter and I will take our patronage and our donations elsewhere. The threat landed like thunder. The headmaster paled. The Lawrence fortune funded half the academy's scholarships. Murmurs shifted. Resistance faltered. No one dared challenge her further. Outside the hall, Benjamin waited anxiously. When Janet emerged, Mirabel skipping at her side, his eyes widened. "I'm sorry," he whispered, bracing for bad news. Janet knelt to his level, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "Benjamin, listen to me. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a child with a mind worth protecting, and I will protect you. From now on, you walk beside us, not behind." Benjamin's breath caught. For the first time, the shame that clung to him like a second skin loosened. He nodded slowly, a tear slipping down his cheek. Mirabel hugged him fiercely. "See, I told you Mama believes in you." The billionaire mother had defied the academy's elite. She had stood not for wealth, but for a homeless boy. Some called her reckless. Others called her brave. But one truth was undeniable. Benjamin's life was no longer invisible. And as Janet looked at him across the dinner table, his notebook open beside Mirabel's, she knew she had crossed a line she could never step back from. The uproar at St. Andrew's Academy eventually died down, but the story did not fade. Newspapers spun it into headlines, and social media buzzed with debate. Some mocked Janet for adopting strays. Others hailed her as a champion of justice. Janet ignored the noise. She had already made up her mind. One rainy morning, she called her assistant into the study. "Prepare the paperwork," she instructed. "Guardianship, education rights, everything." The assistant blinked. "For the boy, ma'am," for Benjamin, Janet corrected firmly. "I will not have him tossed back to the streets the moment gossip shifts. He deserves more than my protection in passing. He deserves permanence." He looked up warily as she entered, as though expecting to be told his time was up. Instead, Janet sat across from him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes softened. "Benjamin, do you know what guardianship means?" He shook his head slowly. "It means someone takes responsibility for you, not just today, not just until the scandal dies, but for your future. It means you'd have a home, a school, a chance." Benjamin's breath caught. He clutched the notebook tighter. "But why me?" Janet leaned forward. "Because my daughter believes in you. Because you've proven you have a mind worth nurturing. And because I see myself in you. I fought my way into a world that said I didn't belong. You remind me of that fire." Tears welled in his eyes, but he shook his head. "I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," Janet said firmly. "This is justice. Every child deserves a chance. And I'm offering you yours." Reporters filled the steps outside, flashes bursting as Janet walked in, holding Mirabel's hand, Benjamin trailing shyly beside them. Inside, the judge scanned the documents, then looked at the boy. "Benjamin, do you understand what this means? Janet Lawrence would become your legal guardian. She would be responsible for your upbringing." Benjamin's voice trembled. "It means I get a home." "Yes," the judge nodded. Benjamin turned toward Janet. Her steady gaze met his, and for the first time, he let the words slip through his lips with quiet wonder. "Then, yes, please." The gavel struck. "Granted." Questions flew. Why him? Will he stay in the academy? What about the Lawrence estate? Janet stopped on the courthouse steps, her voice clear and resolute. "This boy is no different from any of your children. He has a mind that hungers for knowledge, a heart that deserves love, and a right to live with dignity." Wealth means nothing if we use it only to build walls. I choose to build bridges. Her words swept across headlines within hours. Critics sneered, but many were moved. And for Benjamin, the world tilted on its axis. He was no longer just the boy clutching a notebook in the shadows. He was a son. That evening, Mirabelle pulled Benjamin into her room giggling. "Now you're really my brother. We can do homework together forever." Benjamin laughed, the sound foreign on his lips, but warming quickly. He set his mother's notebook beside hers on the desk. For the first time, the dream of becoming someone his mother would be proud of, felt possible. And for Janet, watching from the doorway, the decision was no longer about charity, nor even justice. It was about love, the kind that redefines family, not by blood, but by choice. The first Monday after the court's decision dawned bright and clear. Sunlight spilled across the city, gilding the rooftops, as though even the sky wanted to witness a new beginning. At the gates of St. Andrew's Academy, whispers buzzed louder than the morning bells. Students craned their necks. Parents lingered in their cars. Everyone waited to see if the rumor was true, if the billionaire mother had really taken a homeless boy as her own. And then the car rolled up. Janet stepped out first, radiant and composed in a simple suit. Mirabelle hopped down next her face, alight with mischief and pride. Finally, Benjamin emerged. But he no longer wore the tattered clothes that had once marked him an outsider. He stood in the crisp uniform of the academy, the blazer slightly big on his thin shoulders, his shoes new and shining. For a moment, silence fell. Then gasps rippled through the crowd. "Is that him? The homeless boy? He looks different." Benjamin felt the stares like heat against his skin. Old instincts urged him to shrink, to bow his head. But then Mirabelle grabbed his hand boldly, tugging him forward. "Come on, brother. We're going to be late." The word brother echoed through the courtyard, silencing even the cruelest whispers. Janet walked beside them, her chin high every step. A silent declaration. He belongs here. He belongs with us. In class, Benjamin opened his mother's old notebook one last time. Its pages were filled, worn, thin edges curled. He touched the final page where her handwriting lingered. "Keep learning, my son. The world needs your light." Beside it lay a brand new notebook Mirabelle had given him. The first page was blank, waiting. Benjamin smiled faintly. For the first time, he understood his story wasn't ending. It was beginning. That evening, the Lawrence mansion was filled with sounds it hadn't known in years. The clatter of pencils across desks, the squeals of two children chasing each other down the hallway, laughter, real unguarded laughter that echoed against the marble like music. Janet watched them from the balcony, her heart swelling. For years, she had built walls, legal, financial, emotional. Yet in protecting her daughter and this boy, she had discovered something money could never buy, a family reborn. She whispered to herself, "Wealth is empty without someone to share it with." To everyone's surprise, Benjamin stood with them. The boy who once hid in shadows now stood before the entire academy. His voice clear, his explanations sharp. When the three finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Janet, seated in the front row, blinked back tears. She had once been known only as the billionaire attorney feared and admired in equal measure. Now she was something else entirely. A mother who had chosen love over pride, compassion over appearances. And as Benjamin bowed shyly, clutching both notebooks, the old and the new, Janet knew his mother's spirit lived on in him. In the garden that night, Mirabelle and Benjamin planted a sunflower together. Its fragile stalk swayed in the evening breeze, tilting toward the fading sun. Benjamin pressed soil around its roots, whispering, "For Mama." She said I should always turn toward the light. Janet rested a hand on his shoulder. "And now you never have to turn alone." The boy looked up at her, his eyes shimmering with gratitude. For the first time, he believed the truth that had once seemed impossible. He was no longer homeless. He was home. True family is not written in blood or wealth. It is written in love, in choices that defy prejudice, and in the courage to see potential where others see only weakness. Like the sunflower, hope always turns toward the light, and when nurtured, it blooms where no one expects.